to their members, whether that's the residents of a housing co-op, or the worker owners of a worker co-op, or the consumers in a food co-op. Control over that entity belongs to the members. And the money then that that entity makes stays in the community, which is, not true at the Bank of America or a lot of larger corporations, right? The money is sucked out of the community and elsewhere. Arkansas, for one example. So we think co-ops for a long time have sort of been the edge of building that co-op economy and building an alternative economy. And increasingly now, well, in the past, there have been times when the various co-op sectors have interacted more and been more mutually supportive. That is also more true, I think, in other countries, not the United States so much. We're starting to see that be re-energized, I think, in this country. Partly, I think, as part of the solidarity economy, a lot of people who came out of the Occupy movement are interested in co-ops as an alternative economic model. So you're starting to see some of those connections being made, which I think is really critical to building the solidarity economy or the co-op economy. Let me check my notes. I'll try to be fast. So, we also, the other thing that the Co-op Fund does, one other thing that the Co-op Fund does, is work as an investment vehicle to allow individuals or other organizations that want their money to go into co-ops to be used in that way. So people can invest in the Co-op Fund, people also invest in Andy's fund, so that we can then take their money and use it in a structured way to lend it back out into the co-op movement. And we have, I think on the back table, there are copies of our annual report from last year, and at the back, there are two pie charts that show who our lenders are, who our borrowers are, and who our investors are. And you can see it's this pretty broad swath of the progressive population in this country. We also build partnerships with other organizations that help our catchment areas. So we work, for example, we work with Stacy from the Boston Center for Community Ownership. We work with CDI, the Co-op Development Institute. We provide as much direct technical assistance as we can, a lot of it around financing and financial questions, because that's our area of expertise. And then we partner with other organizations that can provide other kinds of technical assistance to our borrowers. And then we're involved in sort of bigger picture things. We're involved in Boston in the New Economy Coalition. We work with the Valley Alliance of Worker Co-ops. We work with the worker owner and run cooperative network. Not co-op, cooperative network? Yes, okay, thanks, sorry. It's called Workin'. I say Workin' all the time. I never remember what it stands for. And we bring to the table, I think, a knowledge of financing and provide, as I said, finance-related technical assistance. We try to keep co-ops visible and on the table as an option, both for people who are interested in starting up a business and for people who want to maybe convert an existing business to a cooperative, either because they are ready to retire or because they want to share ownership and responsibility with their employees. And we provide, as Judy said, access to capital for both startup co-ops and for existing co-ops in an ongoing sort of way. I had more, but I'm going to stop because it's more pertinent, I think, for the table discussions than for this part of the program.
Well, my name's Tom Sgouros. I live in Rhode Island, where I'm a freelance policy consultant, and I guess I prefer to speak standing. But it's always better to have a podium too.
You didn't say that you were a nerd too.
And I'm a nerd. I'm very much a nerd. Okay. So I wanted to talk just about banks generally and about finance, because these are part of a much larger picture. And a point that I want to start with is that you hear a lot about financial crimes, about J.P. Morgan was fined $9 billion last week, and Bank of America was actually fined $840 million. yesterday for mortgage fraud. The thing about financial crime is that there are no victimless financial crimes. You know, that's money that was actually taken from somebody, and that's terrible, right? I mean, but the other thing is that, like so many things, the real outrages are actually the legal ones. You know, J.P. Morgan and Bank of America got caught on those things, but there's plenty more. There's there's the kind of predatory financing that Andy was talking about how who knew that marketing financial services to the poor could be so profitable, but it turns out it is. I've been cataloging something that I call predatory public financing, and that's where the banks seem to treat our states and cities and counties as marks to be fleeced rather than as customers to be served. The city of Philadelphia, the school system in Philadelphia lost $300 million in the last couple of years over these interest rate swaps that they had done with a bunch of banks. I don't know if you've been following it, but the school system in Philadelphia this year has laid off pretty much everybody who's not a teacher. So that means no librarians, no aides, no after school, anything. There's nothing going on in the Philadelphia schools except teachers. And a big part of it is because the money that would have paid for that is now actually going to Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. Jefferson County in Alabama was put on the hook for over $3 billion. J.P. Morgan made $640-something million in fees from this debt deal. And the school district in San Diego, the Poway Unified School District, borrowed $105 million on a bond that is going to eventually cost $877 million in interest. So this is the landscape of the financial industry in America. You've got predatory financing, you've got predatory public finance, you've got criminality, and what I say is that when faced with a landscape of not very helpful financial institutions, what's the appropriate response? And one appropriate response is that people are trying to regulate them better. And there's a lot of people doing that, and more power to them. And sometimes they're doing a little bit too much, as Andy was pointing out. But that's great. Go for it. Do it, and do it, and keep working on it. But you have to say that it's not necessarily, they're not necessarily having the greatest effect. The other thing that you can do, though, another possible response when faced with a landscape of not very helpful financial institutions, is to try to create new ones. And that's what I think that we all have almost a responsibility to try to do. And so there's a bunch of examples that I've been aware of. Andy's organization is actually one of them. But there's there's a bunch of cities and towns across the country that have created a mutual bond insurance company. So rather than go to a regular insurance company to insure their bonds, they started their own insurance company. They said, look, we have all this wealth. We control this wealth. We don't have to go to the insurance companies to do it. We can do it ourselves. So they did that, and it's working. It's called the Build America Mutual Bond Insurance. I'm also aware that there's a group of people at a spin-off from Occupy Wall Street people who are trying to start a debit card, of all things. I mean, it's going to be a Visa card too, which is driving half of Occupy crazy, and the other half thinks it's great. But the point is that they're trying. They have created a co-op to run this debit card, whose purpose is going to be to serve poor people. So that's another example of somebody who's actually trying to do something different. I'm actually involved with a city in Pennsylvania who is trying to move their money out of Wells Fargo and into local community banks, and we are actually creating a new institution, a nonprofit that is going to be able to both help the city move its money out of Wells Fargo and into these local banks, but also serve as a vehicle for the city to get local banks behind their initiatives, so that they can go to a bank and say, look, we'll give you $1 million of deposits, but would you mind helping us with this lead abatement initiative? We'll give you $2 million worth of deposits to this bank, but we really want some help with the storefront improvement initiative. They have a bunch of things that they have in mind, and with this new nonprofit, they expect to be able to enlist the aid of the smaller banks in a way that they haven't before. But that's the goal, is that we have to find ways to invent new institutions that have some kind of democratic accountability to them if we want to turn the financial industry back into something that serves the real economy instead of just being a profit center of its own. And the last thing before I turn it back over is that I would be, my publisher would be mad at me if I didn't also mention that I just finished a book about the nuts and bolts of how banks and finance work, and it's aimed at people who don't like banks, and specifically to encourage people to do this kind of experimentation and see what kind of financial power can be grown out of the communities that we live in, whether it be with the government or in a cooperative way. Anyway, thank you. Would you like my podium?
Thank you. Thanks for the offer. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. And I just want to thank Boone for inviting me on this panel. I think what you all are doing here is incredible and a continuation of a movement that started much before my time, and I'm really proud to be part of that legacy. I also want to thank the gentleman who sang songs today. I just feel like, I was sitting here, I'm like, really, he's going to make us sing this morning? And then I started doing the do-do-do-do-do, and I really appreciate arts and culture in our work, and we just don't have enough of it. And in fact, we're trying to reinvigorate that in our work and in our campaigns, and so I really appreciate having music here today, so thank you for that. So Community Labor United came out of the Greater Boston Labor Council. It was a way to strengthen the labor movement by building relationships with organized community groups on the ground. And started in Boston, and we ran a few kind of joint campaigns. The idea is that we build a united front with the strength of the unions and the strength of community-based organizations. And we, a few years ago, formed what's called the Green Justice Coalition. It essentially was a campaign committee of ours that really looked at trying to move us into the green economy, trying to redefine or define what a green job is, trying to ensure that leadership of the green economy comes from low-income communities and communities of color, and to make sure that we weren't heading into this. It was an opportunity for us to envision and imagine a new kind of economy that we didn't want green capitalism. We actually wanted something that was really rooted in our politics and in our movement. And so we started actually with not a revolutionary thing, but an energy efficiency campaign. At the time, there was a lot of money coming out from the Obama administration saying this was going to create green jobs, and we started doing research on what was happening around energy efficiency programs, and learned that our utility companies actually are the ones that administer these programs. And so, who do you think pays for those programs? Exactly. Everybody has a utility bill, and there's like a 1.001% that we all pay into these programs. But it was clear that we were, one, not getting the jobs for these programs, and two, that we were not actually getting the services as working class communities. So we ran a campaign, we won, we did some great work, it was awesome. We decreased carbon emissions by I don't know how many tons, it was awesome. We created some jobs and blah, blah, right? Awesome. Second, so then we use this Green Justice Coalition framework around these principles to run a public transit campaign. It was a time when the leadership of the Amalgamated Transit Union was changing nationally, saying that we need to build partnerships with rider groups. Awesome. Then locally, there was a changeover of new leadership, and who didn't work with the T-Riders Union, a lot of different rider groups across the state. And so we saw this opportunity to actually bring together a union who didn't traditionally work with any folks of color, even though their base is all people of color, to work with organizations of color and working class groups. So So we won a campaign, got them to invest millions of dollars in transit, awesome. Got rider seats on the board, worker rider seats on all the regional transit authority boards, awesome. Got them to mandate that every transit authority had to do these community service assessments and include workers and riders in that, awesome. So we have these great victories, right? We're like, yeah, we're building power. We're building a base. We've got leadership intact, right? These base building organizations and unions are now building relationships with each other, which was the point, right? But we realized that we were actually not building our power nor our goals around decreased carbon emissions or addressing climate change or creating good jobs to scale. That we were winning. We were winning on our issues, we were building a movement, we were building a united front, but we were not building to scale at the scale that we want to contest power where power is at. And so that, for us, was a really important eye-opener, that we can run all these great issue campaigns, we can run all these great policy campaigns, but at the end of the day, what are we actually changing and what are we actually building? So we started looking into how it is that we are actually going to build public transit and do energy efficiency to scale. And that just means, how do we do it big? How do we do it different? How do we do it bold? And so we started looking at infrastructure and how things were financed. And this is like, for many of us who've been plugging away and being paid as an organizer in this nonprofit industrial complex, we don't like to think about finance. We like to think of, yes, alternative economies and things like that, but when it's like the financial world, it's not something we want to think about. So we started looking into how is infrastructure actually being built in Massachusetts and in the country. And we started looking at, we could do like a new public works project where we'd be putting people to work, rebuilding our infrastructure. And I was like, that's not actually going to happen, because what's actually happening is that our infrastructure is crumbling across the country, and you know who's actually rebuilding it? Wall Street. So, I didn't need to say that, but you all were like, yeah, I know. So, but there is some really significant things that are actually happening across the country where Wall Street is investing in public infrastructure and at a more rapid pace than ever before. And so when water sewage treatment plants are being redone in a way that we want to see them being done, even like gray water infrastructure, all of that, it's being financed by Wall Street. It's being financed by Bain Capital and by all those other ones, JP Morgan Chase, whatever. So what we were thinking about was then, how could we actually have some sort of structure, financial structure, that really did invest in infrastructure, that had a quadruple bottom line, because they call it a triple bottom line of rate of return, high rates of return and blah, blah. To actually create good jobs, to actually have it be the projects, infrastructure projects, be identified, controlled, input from the community, to actually have a rate of return with people's funds being invested, so our taxpayer dollars, but also to add an important piece, union pension funds being invested, because we are Community Labor United. And because unions have $3 trillion of assets that are not actually being invested, where do you think that's being invested? Wall Street! So they came to this realization that they actually shouldn't invest in Wall Street, that they should be investing in projects and have their own funds set up so that they are creating good jobs, and they are doing this in a way that's building and strengthening our communities. And for us, the trifecta is moving us to a more sustainable and green economy. So we are looking into developing a green infrastructure bank that puts in public dollars, taxpayer dollars, puts in public pension funds or private union pension funds, and actually leverages some private capital. So we're going to need community banks, but we're also going to need other banks if we're talking about water infrastructure, public transit, lots of other, big scale, large scale energy efficiency, redoing every single building so it's retrofitted so we're not sitting here cold. wearing scarves, hats, that we're actually being more energy efficient in our building usage. So that's what we're doing. We're developing it. We've talked to, this is the kind of thing that is a bigger project that we would ever want to take on as just a community labor coalition. So we're going to start with pilot projects, demonstration projects that really look at how you actually do invest in large-scale infrastructure that does create jobs, that's identified, this project identified by community and controlled by the community, and actually invest in moving us towards a greener, more sustainable economy. And we believe that the solidarity economy is very, very important, but these projects are very important, but we still need to really challenge and organize and build a movement that challenges power where power is at. And for us, this challenges the notion of private capital investing in infrastructure and privatizing our public infrastructure. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much. So, pretty exciting ideas and ways of thinking about resourcing solidarity economy initiatives. We're going to move into the World Bank activity now. World Bank? We are leaving. Finance, right, money. So there are other, it's not just money that we need for resourcing our solidarity economy. And I think that came out very powerfully in our panel. So we have 3 questions, and there will be 2 tables per question. So I will pass out the questions. Everybody will have a chance to answer all 3 questions. So we'll have, what time is it now?
10:20.
10:20, and we have until,
11.
I'm sorry?
10:30. So let's go to 10:45. Yeah.
10:20, okay, 10:20. So we'll just take like 10, can we take half an hour then for questions, and then that would give us just a few minutes for report back? No?
The workshop's supposed to start 10:30. So.
Yeah, well, so 7 minutes per question. 7 times 3 is 21. That gives us 20 minutes for report. All right. All right. So the first question, I'm just going to read them to facilitate. And people who agree to read, the note takers, should position themselves at the appropriate tables. These 2 tables will be question number 1. And you should divide yourselves evenly per table because you're going to have a chance to move around to the other 2 tables. Question number 1, how can the community finance model help us to build a solidarity economy?
So why don't we make one table? Is that all
Why
right?
don't we hear them and then when there's a lot of people not sitting somewhere, so they'll.
Okay, that's question number 1. How can the community finance model help us to build a solidarity economy? Then, what resources for what concrete institutions, assets, relationships, people, etc. can we draw on to build a solidarity economy? Thinking beyond community financing to other resources that we need. And the third question, what resources for a solidarity economy does your work contribute to? Or how do you see yourself connecting to the solidarity economy now or in the future?
So folks in the back come join tables, and we have 7 minutes, and then we switch and we have a chance on each of these questions.
Yeah, question 2.